When the history of the Battle of the World War II Atlantic is written down, it tends to focus on the technology, the code breakers, the radar sets, the hedgehog projectors, or it focuses on the grand strategy, the tonnage war, the battle of production. But warfare at its core is a human endeavor, decided by human decisions under inhuman pressure, and in that arena, one man stands apart. Otto Kretschmer was the highest-scoring U-boat ace of the war, but that statistic, impressive as it is, obscures the more important truth. The real lesson of Kretschmer is not that he sank a lot of ships. The lesson is how he sank them, and what that reveals about the difference between tactical doctrine and tactical genius. What is often ignored in the standard accounts is that Kretschmer's approach was fundamentally at odds with the established playbook. He did not innovate with new technology. He innovated with restraint. His famous motto, "One torpedo, one ship," sounds like a slogan, but it represented a complete rejection of the safety-first mentality that dominated submarine warfare. Most commanders, when they found a target, would fire a spread of torpedoes from a safe distance to guarantee a kill. This made sense on paper. It conserved the element of surprise and kept the boat out of harm's way. But it was also inefficient, and, in a convoy battle, it was slow. Kretschmer understood something that his peers, and even his mentors, took longer to grasp. That the U-boat, handled correctly, was not a stealthy ambush predator that struck and then hid. It was a surface attack craft that could penetrate the heart of a convoy and operate from the inside out. To understand how he did this and why it worked until it suddenly didn't, is to understand the difference between fighting by the book and fighting by instinct. Kretschmer's story does not begin in the cold North Atlantic, but in Exeter, England. Before the war, as a young naval cadet, he spent time studying at Exeter University. He mastered the English language, and more importantly, he studied the English people. This is not a trivial biographical footnote. It directly shaped his tactical philosophy. He understood his enemy not as an abstraction, but as a specific opponent with particular habits, particular blind spots, and a particular culture. He knew how they thought because he had lived among them. This gave him a confidence that bordered on arrogance, but it was a calculated arrogance. He did not fear the Royal Navy's destroyer captains because he understood their training. He knew they would look for a U-boat where a U-boat was supposed to be, submerged, periscope up, creeping in at periscope depth. Kretschmer had no intention of being where he was supposed to be. The standard tactical guidance for U-boat commanders in the early war emphasized submerged attacks. The periscope was the tool, but Kretschmer flipped this on its head. He operated almost exclusively on the surface at night. His reasoning was simple and devastating. On a dark night with no moon, a surfaced U-boat was nearly invisible. It sat low in the water. Its silhouette was broken by the waves. Against the backdrop of a convoy, which was a mass of dark shapes, it could slip between the escorts and position itself among the merchant ships. The escorts, for their part, were looking for a periscope feather or a submerged contact on their aft deck. They were not looking for a small craft already inside the perimeter. Kretschmer developed a specific technique. He would approach from the dark side of the convoy, usually the windward side, because that masked the white spray from his bow. He would get in close, sometimes within a few hundred meters of a target. At that range, he didn't need a spread of torpedoes. One torpedo, aimed at the merchant ship's midsection, was enough to break its back. He would fire, then slip between the columns of the convoy, using the burning wrecks as cover, and line up his next shot. In one memorable engagement during the attack on convoy SC-7 in October 1940, Kretschmer and his crew operated inside the convoy for hours, surfacing, firing, moving, reloading, while the escorts rushed around the periphery hunting for a threat they could not find. He sank 7 ships in that one action. The escorts never touched him. But this strategy, as effective as it was, had a shelf life. It relied on a specific set of conditions: darkness, the absence of effective shipborne radar, and, well, a predictable escort response. By March 1941, those conditions were eroding. The Royal Navy was starting to equip its escorts with Type 286 radar. It was primitive, unreliable, and had a short range, but honestly, it was a game changer because it could detect a surfaced contact. On the night of March 16, 1941, Kretschmer took U-99 into convoy, checks 112. It was the same maneuver that had worked a dozen times before. He slipped past the escorts on the surface and began his attack. But this time, the escorts, commanded by Donald McIntyre on HMS Walker, were not hunting blind. They had radar. They knew something was there. They just couldn't see it yet. When Kretschmer finished his attack and tried to withdraw, he found the escape routes blocked. He dove to escape, a maneuver he almost never did, and it was his undoing. As soon as he went under, the destroyers had him on Aztec. The depth charges rained down. His boat was crippled. He surfaced to save his crew and was taken prisoner. What is often overlooked in this final action is the human factor. Kretschmer's decision to dive was, by his own later admission, a mistake. He broke his own rule. He later said he should have stayed on the surface and tried to outrun them, relying on darkness and speed. But the pressure of the moment, the confusion, the new technology, it forced him into a conventional response, and it cost him his command. The lesson is clear. A successful tactic is only successful until the enemy adapts. Kretschmer's genius bought him 18 months of dominance, but it could not buy him immunity from the inevitable countermeasure. What, then, is the lasting takeaway from Kretschmer's career? It is not the tonnage. It is the principle of economy of force. He understood that overkill is not just wasteful, it is dangerous. Firing a spread of torpedoes from a safe distance might guarantee a sinking, but it also reveals your position, consumes your limited ammunition, and forces you to break contact. Kretschmer's method was surgical. One torpedo, one ship. Get in, get out, and stay in the fight as long as possible. He treated the U-boat not as a fragile submersible, but as a warship capable of operating on the surface in the heart of the enemy formation. This required immense discipline from his crew. No loud voices, no panicked reactions. Silent running wasn't just a technical setting, it was a mental state. For the survivalist-minded viewer, there is a deeper lesson here about preparedness. Kretschmer succeeded because he prepared for the specific conditions of the battlefield, not the idealized conditions of the training manual. He studied his enemy, he understood the environment, he trusted his equipment, but he trusted his judgment more. And when the environment changed, when radar leveled the playing field, he was finally defeated. But even in defeat, he saved most of his crew. He surfaced into gunfire to let them escape the sinking boat. That final act was not a tactic, it was a choice. It reflected a code of conduct that separated the professional from the fanatic. The story of Otto Kretschmer matters today because it strips away the mythology of the ace and replaces it with the reality of the professional. He was not a Nazi ideologue. He avoided propaganda appearances when he could. After the war, he served in the West German Navy and eventually became a senior officer in NATO. He corresponded with his former adversaries, including the men who captured him. He understood that war is a contest of skill and will, not a moral crusade. And that understanding, that clear-eyed professionalism, is what made him so effective. He fought without hate and he fought without fear. That is a rare combination. If you found this deep dive into the strategy and mindset of a master of his craft valuable, take a moment to subscribe to War Machino. We don't do surface-level summaries. We dig into the overlooked details, the forgotten decisions, and the hard lessons of history. Share this with someone who wants to understand not just what happened, but why it happened. Because in the end, the best way to honor those who fought is to understand with precision and honesty exactly what they did and how they did it.